Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for the Wisconsin Department of Revenue My Tax Account New User webinar. My name is Gianna Schultz, and I am a lead in the Business Tax Unit in our Customer Service Bureau. Presenting today will be Tom Rabine, the Quality Assurance Coordinator in the Customer Service Bureau, and Nicole Buchholz, a Business Tax Specialist in the Customer Service Bureau. Among other things, today we're going to cover logging into My Tax Account, give an overview of key features of My Tax Account, and show you examples of filing and paying sales and use tax returns and withholding tax returns. We'll also walk through an example of filing a withholding tax reconciliation along with a W-2 and 1099 on My Tax Account. If you have any questions during today's webinar, please type them in the questions pane and an agent will reply to you individually throughout the webinar. If you have any questions in the future or have questions that may require more time to research or answer, please go to our website or call or email the Wisconsin Department of Revenue Customer Service team. A recording will be available on the Wisconsin Department of Revenue training page shortly after the webinar. We've planned this webinar for about 1 hour. I will turn this over to Tom to get us started.
Thank you, Gianna, and I'll add my welcome to the My Tax Account New Users webinar. For today's webinar, we'll be working in a training and testing environment, and there may be some differences in screen appearance. Please be aware if you're working along in My Tax Account, you're in a live environment, and we ask that you don't submit any returns or requests that you complete in this webinar. If you do accidentally submit a return or request, please contact customer service at 608-261-5338 for assistance deleting the return or request. Before we log in, we'd like to point out some helpful resources you can access from the login page. First, you can ask Dory, our chatbot assistant, a My Tax Account question if you wish. Secondly, we have training videos available. In the resources panel, there's a business videos link. I'll just click on that. And then you'll see we have videos ranging from general, such as an overview, to specific, meaning how to file sales and use tax. Also note that you can reset your password from this link here. And if you need in fact, I'll click on it. You can reset your password from here. If you forgot your username, you can click on this link, forgot your username, and have that emailed to you. All right, let's log into My Tax Account. We'd like to mention that although you may have until the last day of the month to file your return, it might be beneficial to try and log into My Tax Account ahead of time. That way, if you have any difficulty with receiving a security code, you'd then have time to resolve any issues before filing and paying taxes. Internal servers and the security settings of your business email system may delay or even prevent you from receiving the security code via email. If your business has such email filters, you'll want to add MTA support at wisconsin.gov as a trusted email address. Contact your computer support area or your email provider for assistance. That email address again is MTA support at wisconsin.gov. Please don't send questions to this email address as this email box isn't monitored for responses. It's only used for electronic delivery of security codes. Now, if this was your first time logging into My Tax Account, you would now be asked to set up a delivery method for a security code via text, email, or Authenticator app. If you do have it set up to receive your security codes your security code as text or email, the default will be to send it via text. If you wish to receive an email instead, click on the More Security Code Delivery Options link. For training and testing purposes, I can populate a security code. And prior to clicking Confirm, we're going to check the box to trust this device. By doing so, a subsequent entry of a security code wouldn't be required unless you log in with a computer that you've never used before or you've deleted your cookies. And now we're into my tax account. Before we go over specific sections, I'll just point out a couple of navigation points. If you click on a link in my tax account, and I'll just pick View Periods here, for example, and if you wish to go back a step, you can either use your browser's back arrow, or you can use this link here. Usually will take you back to the previous page. Also on this page, you don't really see a home button or home link. So again, I'll click on View Periods. If you're in my tax account and you just wish to return to the home page, the words My Tax Account will take you back to the home screen of my tax account. All right, let's go over some of these. Let's go over these tabs here and see what they are. The first tab that you see here is a Favorites tab, and I'll click on that. And if I add a favorite, and I'll do that by clicking Manage. For example, if my only responsibility is filing and paying sales and use tax, I can highlight that, click OK, and then when I log in, I'm only going to see the sales and use tax account. I still have access to the other accounts, but I would just see this account. I'm going to undo that for the purposes of the webinar by unhighlighting it. And then we'll take a look at the next tab, which is the Summary tab, which is the default for most users. And the Summary tab is going to show you the tax accounts that you have access to. In this case, it's business tax registration, which really isn't a tax account necessarily. It's a way to track your business tax registration and make the periodic payments that you need to make for your business tax registration fee. You'll notice that we have access to the sales and use tax account. And on the home page here, you'll notice that it indicates that we are a quarterly filer for withholding or for sales and use tax. We also have access to withholding tax, and the filing frequency for withholding tax is also quarterly. And a little bit later in the webinar, we'll be filing and paying sales and use tax and filing and paying withholding tax. So we'll come back to these links in a little bit. The next tab is Action Center. And as what you'd expect there, it will indicate any unread messages or unread letters that you may have, and any upcoming filings. It'll alert you to that. We'll go to the Settings tab. And one of the main things on the Settings tab that I'd like to make you aware of is the mail delivery option. The default is to receive mail via paper. If you want to receive the mail electronically, click on the word paper, and then you can read the terms and conditions here and check the radio button for electronic and save it, and you'll receive your mail via electronic methods. Let's go back. And let's click on the More tab. In the More tab, let's take a look at the Payments and Returns panel. And the first link there is Manage Payments and Returns. And I'll click on that. While this link sounds like it's where you would go for filing return, it's actually more useful for researching past payments or returns. we'll recommend for filing and paying a return to click on the specific account to file. And like I said earlier, we'll take a look at an example of that in a few minutes. Let's go back. Request a payment plan, primarily used for accounts that are in collections. View payment breakdown. If you make a bulk payment and I want to see how it got broken down between tax accounts, you can check that here. Pay real estate fees are view or cancel scheduled payments. Let's take a look at that. If you schedule a payment for a future date and it has not been processed, you can go here to cancel that payment. Let's move to the letters panel and click on View Letters. So here are your notices or letters that the department has sent you. And typically, if you do have a seller's permit, a copy of the seller's permit is included in the letters link. And also a business tax registration certificate is typically in the letters link as well. And let's head over to the messages panel. Here's where you can view your messages. And let's click on Manage Email Subscriptions. Here's where you can manage your communications with the department. Let's take a look at the submissions panel and we'll click on Search Submissions. Here's where you can search for all your submissions made via My Tax Account. There are draft submissions which are saved but not yet submitted, pending submissions which are submitted but not yet processed, and processed and deleted submissions. Now we don't see any pending here right now, but after we file and pay sales tax and withholding tax, tab would be an example of that a little bit later on in the webinar. W-2 1099 submissions. Nicole will discuss this link in more detail later on in the webinar. And then the names and addresses panel, we can click on Manage Names and Addresses. And here you can add a DBA name, for example, or you can update a mailing address. All right, let's return to the home page. So after the More tab, another important link is Manage My Profile, which is in the upper right-hand portion of the screen. Let's click on that. And the default is to the Profile tab, and here is where you'll see the stuff that you would normally see underneath a Profile tab in an online account. Your username, your name, your email contact address, so please keep that up to date. Phone contact, here's where you can go to change your password if you wish, or your secret question. And this is where you can go to update, change, or add the delivery method for your security code. So if I click on that, you can see that we have it set up to receive text message or an email. And if you wish to change that, you just click on the X and that will remove the email, for example, but then you would just add in a new one. The next tab is Action Center. Similar to what we saw before, this will show you your unread messages. And next is the More tab. And let's start with the Request Additional Access panel. The first link there is request access to an account. And let me give you a scenario where you may use that. For example, as a new business, you may just be registered for sales and use tax. But as your business grows, you now need to hire employees. So you'd register for a withholding tax account via the online registration on the Department of Revenue website. Once you've been assigned a withholding tax account, this is where you'd add the withholding account to your existing My Tax Account profile. You can do that by clicking on Request Access to an Account. You'll be choosing Business Accounts. Click on Next. And then that will take you to what I'll call a verification page. We're going to ask you for a piece of information to verify that you should have access to this account and are associated with the business. So for example, since in our example, we have a sales and use tax account, I can choose sales and use tax. And one point of verification that you can use to add business tax accounts is a total tax due from a prior return. And since we chose sales tax, that would be a total tax due from a prior return for sales tax. And if we click on the info link, the amount should be from one of the 3 most recently filed returns. Is what you would want to use. Instead of using a total tax due from a prior return, you can use a letter ID. It's not just any letter ID. If I click here again, it will show you the letter IDs that are typical that you can use for verification. For business tax users, most commonly it would be a business tax registration greeting letter, which we would have mailed to you upon your initial registration. Another common one is a notice of estimated tax. You could use a letter ID from that to verify your association to the business and gain access to the business tax account. All right. Let's exit out of this and go back to manage my profile. The next link in the request additional access panel is request access to a third-party account. So this is where a third-party preparer would go to request access to your tax accounts if they've been hired to file and pay for you. But this could also be used by individuals that own multiple entities and would like to manage all of the entities under a single My Tax Account profile. Let's take a look at the Payment Sources panel, and there's a single link there called Manage Payment Sources. Let's click on that. If you have a saved payment source, this is where you'd go to delete that payment source if you changed banks. You'll see there isn't a saved payment source here right now. You can either add it here, but most of the time, or most people will be adding that payment source when they make that first payment, and you'll save it. And we'll show you an example of that when we make a payment after we file the sales and use tax return. And view messages and email subscriptions, we've done that already. And then the Manage Access panel. And I'll click on Manage My Access. So in the Manage My Access panel, there's an important piece of information here. And this indicates that I'm a master user. So since I'm the master user for the accounts, I have more privileges than what I'll call an account manager. So if you're an account manager, and I'll go back to this panel, you'll see less links here underneath Manage Access because a master has more privileges. And let's take a look at those extra links. First, I'll click on Manage My User's Access. This function really would only be used by a larger accounting firm. As an example, if they would have 50 employees servicing 1,000 client accounts, They can create groups of clients and assign those groups to specific employee user accounts that they create. Let's click on Manage Other Users Access. If you are the master account holder for the business, you can view all my tax accounts registered for the business and manage a user's access level. Here you can see that we have one account manager for the business other than myself, the master account user. Then we'll click on Manage Third-Party Access. And again, if you are the master account holder for the business, you can manage the access for third parties that have access to your accounts. And here you can see there is a single third party that does have access to our accounts. All users should have access to this link, Delete My Profile. So if you no longer need the My Tax account, you can close your My Tax account by following this link. And the next link is Close Accounts. So you'll see this link at several places in My Tax account. And this is where you can go to close a business tax account. First, you'll choose a reason. And then you'll choose one of the accounts, and then you would enter in a close date and submit this in order to close that, or a more correct term probably be inactivate that account. Let's back out of that. And here again, we see search submissions. We already looked at that from the More tab from the main page. And View Activity is going to just give you a log, if you will, of when you've accessed the account. Let's go back to the home page. And let's take a closer look at the sales and use tax account and file and pay a return. So from the home page, we have the option to file pay view returns. Here again, we have access to the view submissions link, view mail, and close account. So we've seen those already. So to file, we're going to click on File Pay View Returns. And before we file, you'll see a few links in the upper right-hand portion of the screen. We have Filing and Payment History. Let's click on that. And it does just what it says it's going to do. It gives you a filing and payment history for the sales and use tax account. And you can choose a start date and an end date. So if you wanted to just take a peek at all of your filings and payments for tax year 2022, for example, you could do that here. View account attributes gives you these three basic facts: the account number, the account start date, and the filing frequency. Appeal. Here's where you can go to file an appeal if you received a late filing fee, for example. Here again is close account. Here's where you can request an extension to file. Keep in mind a couple of things when filing for an extension. The request needs to be done prior to the due date, and the payment is still due timely. And here again, we have a link to view or cancel scheduled payments, where you can cancel payment if it has not been processed yet. All right, since we're a quarterly filer, the first quarter has already been filed, and filing for the second quarter is due by the end of July. So let's file that now. I'll do that by clicking File Now. And once we do that, you'll notice on this page, Filing Tips. You have access to a short how-to video for filing the ST12, which is what the name of the form is. You have a link to the form instructions for filing the ST12, common sales tax questions, And you also have a link to the sales tax rate chart, which will list all of the counties in Wisconsin and their sales tax rate. The first question is, do you plan to report 0 on every line? So some users do not have any sales tax to report for a given period. If you have an active account, even though you may not have any sales, we still need you to file a report in the amount of 0. So if that's the case, all you need to do is click on yes and click next, and it'll fill in all the zeros for you, and you could submit that. Let's go back. But in our example, we are going to file with a sales tax or with a sales amount. So I'll leave the default here at no, and I'll click on next. And let's put in some sales. And then lines 2, 3, 4, and 5 are subtractions. Sales for which you received exemption certificates, sales of other exempt property and services. So if you have questions on that, you can click on the link or go to the form instructions for examples there. Same thing for sales returns, allowances, and debts. Click on the link here. It'll give you an example of what that is, but you also have access to the form instructions for more examples. And line 5 is other. One of the common subtractions there is if line 1 includes the sales tax, you can subtract the amount of sales tax out in line 5, so you're not taxed on sales tax. What you'll notice here is my tax account automatically did the calculation for you, so we can move on to the next step. The next step is going to ask for state use tax. If you have questions on use tax, you can click on the link for use tax information. But for our example, we are not going to put in an amount of use tax. We'll leave the default at 0 and click next. And then it asks us if we have any county tax to report. So in our example, we will put in an amount for county tax. So in fact, we'll put in that same amount. We'll just say all of our sales were in Milwaukee County. If you have sales that were not in, if you have sales in a county and it's not listed, you can just click in the blank box in the county section, and it'll give you a drop down of all of the counties, and you can add as many counties as you wish. All right, so all of our sales are in Milwaukee County. We did not have any purchase subject to county use tax, so we're going to leave that default at 0. And we'll click on next. Do you have any city of Milwaukee tax to report? For our example, all of our sales were in the city of Milwaukee, so they have a city tax. So I'll click on yes. And it asks for sales subject to city sales tax for the city of Milwaukee. And I'll put in that same amount for our example. And I'll click on next. And now we get a summary page. My tax account has done all of the calculations for us. And you can see that here, including a discount. So if you file on time and pay on time, you'll receive a discount. Do you want a confirmation email? I'll say yes. And now I'm ready to submit. So I'll click on submit. I will accept the attestation. And that should take us to a confirmation page. So you'll receive a confirmation number for filing the return. For sales and use tax, you'll actually, for filing and paying, you'll need to receive 2 confirmation numbers because we just received a confirmation number for filing, but we still need to pay. So in order to pay this amount, I'll click on make a payment. And I'll choose sales and use tax. Would you like to apply your payment to a specific tax year or period? We can choose yes in our example. We're filing for the second quarter of 2025. And it is not a payment for amended return. We'll leave the default at no. And we'll click on next. And now it's asking for the method of payment. Most people choose bank account. There aren't any fees, and you'll enter in a routing and account number from a savings or checking account. Other payment methods, if you're paying by credit card, for example, there are fees that are assessed. Or if you wanted to mail a check, you could click on Create Printable Payment Voucher. But we are going to use a checking or savings account, so we'll leave the default on bank account and click Next. All right. So for training and testing purposes, I can populate a routing number. Of course, you'd use your routing number from your financial institution. And I'll just make up an account number here. And we'll say this is a checking account. And here's where you can save the payment source for future use. So I'll say yes, and now it will be saved for future use. If I wanted to, I could change the payment date to the end of the month. The payment isn't due until the end of the month. But for the purposes of the webinar, I'll just leave it as today's date. Confirm the amount. And before I submit, there's a text box here with some information. And one of the points I'd like to make is you must authorize payment before 4 p.m. Central Time on the payment due date for that payment to be on time. All right, looks like I'm ready to submit. I'll agree. So now I have my second confirmation number for filing and paying sales and use tax. Again, sales and use tax, you get one for filing and one for paying. All right, one more thing I'd like to show you before we turn it over to Nicole for withholding tax is if you need to amend a previous sales and use tax return, you would follow that same path by clicking on File, Pay, View Returns. And if I needed to amend the first quarter, for example, I could click on View or Amend Return. And here I would just go ahead and click on Amend. And then I would just change the numbers to what they should be. And at the end of this process, the system will ask you to enter in a reason why you're amending it, and then you'll submit that amended return. All right. That's what I have for sales and use tax, so I'll send it over to Nicole for withholding tax.
Thank you, Tom. Now we'll look at filing a WT6 deposit report and the WT7 annual reconciliation. From the home page, I want you to click on the File, Pay, View Returns for the withholding tax account. If you're an annual filer for withholding tax, you're not required to file WT6 reports during the year, so you can just file the WT7 at the end of the year without filing a WT6 report. In most cases, you'll want to file and pay the WT6 by locating the File WT6 return option listed on this page. If you need to file a WT6 with a zero amount, you can click Yes for the first option and continue. We'll enter an amount for withholding. If you're just filing without making a payment, you can choose No option here for making a payment. But in most cases, a payment is made while filing, so we'll continue to file and pay by clicking the next option. It always asks, would you like a confirmation email? We do recommend that. In our example, we're going to choose bank account. But let's take a look at the other two options first. To pay by a different method, such as a credit card, you'll need to submit the return and then choose a Make a Payment from the confirmation page to pay by credit card. To mail a payment, you'll need to submit the return and choose Print Voucher from this confirmation page. For payment for us today, we are going to choose the saved payment source from paying the sales and use tax. If you want, you can choose a payment date in the future, but for our example, we're just going to choose today's date. You do have to confirm the amount. Please note the notes here in the bottom section, and we just hit Submit. You have to agree to the attestation, click OK, and here is our confirmation page. Notice how this is different from filing and paying sales and use tax. For withholding tax, we have a single confirmation number for filing the return and making the payment. Now let's return to the home page to review how to file the WT7 annual withholding tax reconciliation. So just like before, you go down to the withholding account, you're going to click on File, Pay, View Returns, and then you find the WT7 return link. This is just a warning because it is a little early to file it since it's not due until 2026. Please note in the filing tips section where you can get more information, including form instructions, common questions, EFW2 file transfer, and any withholding tax updates. As I stated before, your 2025 WT7 annual reconciliation and wage and information statements aren't due until January 31st of 2026. But let's just do an overview on how it's done. We'll offer several webinars in January of 2026 as a refresher as well. First, let's discuss the scenario where you have no withholding tax to report on your WT7 reconciliation, but have W-2s to report. For this scenario, you'll want to answer no to the question on this page and submit the WT7 with zero amounts. We still need the W-2s, and you can submit them to us from the My Tax account from the W-2 1099 entry link from the home page. We'll show you how to do that, though, in a few minutes. Before we continue, let's actually discuss the submission of W-2s and 1099s for Wisconsin. If you have 1099s with withholding tax, you would report those on the W-T7. If you have 1099s to submit to us that don't have withholding, don't report those 1099s on the W-T7. Please only list returns on the W-T7 withholding reconciliation that have Wisconsin withholding tax. We do need those information returns, however, they just don't need to be listed on the W-T7. If you have W-2s or 1099s that you need to submit to us that don't have withholding, we'll show you how to do that just a little later. If you have any further questions, please use the links in the filing tips section on this page, or just call customer service at 608-261-5338 for more information. But for now, let's keep our example simple and just file a W-T7 with a single W-2 with withholding. As you can see, there are several options to send the W-2s to the department. The first option is to key the W-2 in right now while you're filing the W-T7 by clicking the My Tax Account box. The second option is File Transfer. Please note, you'd select File Transfer if you've already entered the wage and information returns using the Enter W-2 1099 information link prior to filing the W-T7. Otherwise, you would select File Transfer if you're going to upload an electronic file to us. If you need further assistance or have any additional questions about electronic file transfers, please click on the EFW2 file transfer link on this page. If you have 9 or less than a single type of information return, you can mail them to us without penalty, and you would just select that paper option. But for our example today, we are going to key in the W-2 while filing the W-T7. We will say yes to the question, are you entering any W-2s? You scroll down until you click on the Add W-2 link. And then we will fill in all the information for the employee's W-2, including their social security number, their name, street address, once you have their personal information, and you're going to scroll down and you're going to key in all of the financial information for the employee's W-2. For our example today, we are going to save a little time, and we're just going to key in box 1. And then I'm going to scroll down and enter in the state wage information. This section where we'll enter the most important information on the W-2, the state wages and the state income withheld. Once you click that Add button, from here we can click on the pencil icon to edit the W-2 we just entered, or we can click on the double paper icon to copy the previous W-2, or we can simply click the X icon to delete the W-2 altogether. If we had additional W-2s, we could click Add W-2, but for our purposes today, we only have one, so we'll just click Next. We don't have any 1099s with withholding report, so we'll click Next through the 1099 Miscellaneous, 1099 NECs, and then finally the 1099Rs. Now, because we chose to key in the W-2 in the My Tax account, lines 1 through 5 are already pre-filled for us based on what we entered in the previous steps. Since this form isn't due until January of next year, we'll just save the W-2 without submitting. What we're going to do, if you wanted to just take a break, you could always come back and do continue editing. For our purposes, we're just going to finish later after we entered that information. Now we're going to go back to the home page for the withholding account section, and we're going to click on the Enter W-2 1099 information link. This is where if you need to report W-2s or 1099s without withholding or file a corrected W-2 or 1099, you can do that using the Enter W-2 1099 information link. This tool can be especially helpful for those of you that don't have a withholding tax account with us but need to submit W-2s or 1099s to the department that don't have Wisconsin withholding. Please keep in mind this satisfies the state filing requirement, not the federal filing requirement for information returns. We'd also like to note these forms are not printable. But let's see what it looks like to key in a 1099 NEC. So you'll click in the year or enter the year, and then you just go ahead and click Next until you find the 1099 NEC link. So click on Add 1099 NEC, and just like the W-2, we'll start in by keying in the recipient's information. We'll include the Social Security number just like before, the name, the street address, all right, so we have the recipient's information, and then we'll go down to the financial information form on the form. So box 1 and box 7, the state income. Once we have all that information, we're going to, just like the W-2, click the Add button. Now, if you have several forms to key in, or if you get interrupted while working on this, you can save the draft and continue editing. That will save your draft in case you have to take a phone call or the app simply times out. If you're going to leave and continue later, you'll choose the Finish Later, and you can still come back and pick up where you left off. You'll be able to pick it up later by accessing the Search Submissions link from the More tab on your home page. And here are our entries. So here's our W-2 entry and our saved W-T7. You would just click on it, continue editing, and you simply pick up right where you left off. Well, that's it for withholding, so let's send it back to Gianna for a few closing remarks.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you to everyone for joining us. If you have any more questions, please use the contact information on the screen. We'll stick around for a few minutes to finish answering the questions in the chat queue. There's also a brief exit survey when you leave the webinar. But before we go, just a couple reminders. Whenever your email or contact information changes, please update it on the Manage My Profile page. Please don't share your login information or password with any other My Tax Account users. If you want another person to have access to the business tax accounts, have them register for their own My Tax Account. A recorded version of this webinar will be available shortly on our training page. Feel free to share it with colleagues who could not attend the webinar today. Thanks again for attending and have a great day.